Good afternoon. We are going to call the regular meeting of the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority to order on January 27th at 2:00 p.m. For our roll call, we have in Oregon Commissioners Fox, Babbitt, and Polson. Fox and Babbitt are online. We have alternate Thomas online and alternate Edwards online. Is Nate? Nate is not. All right. For the Washington, we have Commissioner Anderson present. Commissioner Keithler will be late an hour. And we have alternate Wilson present. So we have a quorum for voting. Do we have any changes to the agenda from anyone? I would just note that I would like to move the communications government relations to the next hour so that Marla has time to show up. And that we will do the federal lobbyist update at the beginning and then move our states to the end. Are there any other changes? Not seeing any, entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda as modified.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay, we have the corrections of the minutes. I noted on the top of page 2 of the minutes, page 4 of the packet in the co-chair report, showed the current price or the OPC of 1.2 billion. I'd like to amend that to a current target price of 1.12 billion. Is there anything else for changes to the minutes?
Could I just get a clarification on that? Is that based on the estimate that was done back in November, or is this we still haven't reported a new number, right?
That is correct, Arthur.
Okay.
This is back from November. So
Just remind me that when is that going to be available? When's the next number coming out?
The next number will be after the risk workshop, the week of February the 17th, 24th, sorry. Week of the 24th of February when we get through our risk workshop.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you'll hear a little bit more about that later in the day.
Yeah, that's an important thing, so I just want to reinforce that.
Okay. Is there any other changes to the minutes? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Public comment. Is there anybody from the public who would like to provide public comment? We actually have a member of the public here today.
Yay.
It's a first.
Yeah, it's a first.
Absolutely.
No, my name's Mike Trefalis. So back 25 years ago, I was the consultant that did the original DEIS on the $500,000 earmark you got through RTC. So
Wow.
I'm retired now and just interested in what's happening.
And do you live in the area?
Vancouver.
Okay.
I just met a friend for lunch in Hood River, and I'm retired from HRWSBA and a consultant. So just want to see what's happening. I was out in town, knew you had your meeting. So
All right. Well, thanks for coming.
Hey Mike, I was part of that process too, so you're not the only one here from those old days.
okay, I was surprised you still have my reports on your website. So
We're using some of the data still.
Yeah.
appropriately cited.
Okay. Is there any other public comment online? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move to the co-chair's report. I would just say that it has been a very busy couple of weeks. We had 2 days worth of meetings in Vancouver on the design and the cost estimates. We made some good strides with the treaty MOAs, especially the Umatilla tribe. We had a meeting with Oregon staff on the lottery bond sale. We had meetings with ODOT on the charter and service agreements. And we also met with WashDOT on the staff and the WashDOT staff on the reimbursement issues we've been having. And that's just an overview highlight of the many meetings. It's been a busy couple of weeks, and I would just say that our owner's rep is doing an amazing job of managing all of these meetings and competing directions that we need to go at any given time. And it's been fast paced. And so I would just say thank you to staff and thank you to all of you, members of the board and alternates who continue to go to all these meetings. This is just a huge amount of time suck for all of us. And I just thank you all. Commissioner Fox, do you have an update?
Oh, I think you covered it very well.
Okay, we will move on to the project director bridge update.
So we're moving out of phase 1A and preparing for 1B. The real trigger to that is going to be us obtaining our infra grant. We are a little unsure right now when that's going to come through, but we're working under the 15 million that we have from the state of Washington in 5187. And we'll keep in contact, and you'll get an update from our federal lobbyists on where they see the infra coming. But we've got some time between now and June of this year to work through this phase 1A. Part of that is going to be a risk workshop that we've got coming up in February. I'll talk a little more about that later. But we are making progress there. Not a whole lot else on the funding coming out. The BIP and others are still pending. No real updates coming out of Washington on any of that work. We are working with Kiewit right now to do a man-hour negotiations for their phase 1B contract. That will be wrapping up here in February and March with the goal of giving them a notice to proceed in April if we are able to finalize our agreement on the infra grant. So outside of that, we'll be working on some value engineering items and the risk workshop and any risk and or threats and opportunities that come out of that risk workshop and being able to advance those. So that's it.
That was a quick update. There's a lot more on the update in your packet.
There is.
Okay, and then, we've got a hand raised from Rick Evans from Maria Cantwell's office. Rick?
I'll just have to figure out how to lower it. We'll see if we can get there in a second. But hi, everybody. On the infra grant, I wanted to touch base and see if you had any direct communications from Department of Transportation in the last week or so, based on some of the executive orders that came out that were impacting a number of grants. It's several programs, including infra, that could be impacted if there's a agreement in place versus an agreement that's not in place, and other issues that are coming up after some of the actions last week. And I wanted to check in with all of you to see what you might be hearing on that front. Sounds like there's a little bit of that, but is there anything directly related from last week, or is that kind of par for the course on how communications have been?
No, we have not. Our last communications with them, we sent them some responses to comments that the FHWA headquarters had at the end of December. And we have not had any updates since then.
Okay, so no, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, we have seen some language, not necessarily directed at us, that came out that basically kind of give us a heads up. We may not be seeing that agreement with the infra as soon as we would like it. It seems like everything's on hold.
That's the big thing, is if the agreements are not signed yet, it looks like they're going to be retooled before they're put back out. It's a little vague at the moment. That's why it's a lot of moving pieces right now, which is why I want to just kind of leave it open-ended, just to see if there was any communications in the last week or so. We're going to try to get as many grant awardees on the same call at the end of the week for our office. I know the other delegation offices will be doing similar items over the next couple of days and weeks. But if folks are okay with it, I'll send over some of that information, like a calendar hold for Friday, and we'll be able to give kind of a broad update on everything we have after we let another week of of this kind of settle in and folks figuring out implementation versus what was in the executive orders. So if it's beneficial, I'll send that out and folks can jump on to listen in on that on Friday. But as things come up, if there's a concern, if there's issues I'll say contact our office, but contact everybody. I know there's a lot of hands that are overall very supportive of this. So just making sure the delegation is involved as you hear if anything comes up that's a concern. We certainly want to be able to help and share those concerns back out.
Yeah, Rick, the criticality for us is that we cannot move into 1B, which is design, until we get access to that.
And Rick,
And we were supposed to be into 1B right now. We pushed it out. The current estimate is April the 2nd.
and Rick, Sarah Schmidt with Senator Merkley's office said that she was in conversation with Jake Okenberg on this subject also. I see Jake is on, so hopefully he'll be reporting on that soon.
Excellent.
Thank you,
That's
Rick, for the, yes, we'd all like to be on that call, I believe.
perfect. I will get that over.
Okay. We'll move on. Legal report. Mark stated at the last meeting that he'd have a legal report this meeting, and that got sent to us just an hour ago, if everyone's had a chance to review it. Mark, do you have any update?
No, apologies for not having this in hand. I normally don't cover the first meeting, so I was just caught a little short last time. There's not a lot to report this month. Item number 10, which has to do with legislation bringing the authority within the purview of the Oregon Tort Claims Act. We received a draft bill that was prepared for the state legislature and reviewed that and signed off on that. So that is in the works. I have not seen that it has been introduced in the state legislature yet or not, but our work on that is done, and now it's in the hands of your representatives at the legislature. Item number 20, which is the Hood River County loan. We have reached agreement in principle with the Transportation Infrastructure Bank and Hood River County on the terms of an intercreditor agreement. And so we have turned this over to the Funding and Finance Committee for their review as to whether or not or how to proceed with this transaction. So we'll await direction from the committee. And then finally, there's a new matter that we started on, which is revising the project charter among FHWA, ODOT, and the Bridge Authority. We're working on that. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions for Mark? Not seeing any. Next, we will move into our federal update from Mr. Kolb. And if that's Jake, that could be Jake Edwards. We don't know, and it just says Jake.
Oh.
But Jim?
Yeah,
It's-
well, I mean, Rick covered a little bit about, what's been happening here. I think most folks have seen, the administration came out with a executive order on day one that basically put a pause on what had been interpreted as all funding made available under the IIJA, or the bill, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Under that includes our infra grant, which was, or the infra program, which of course we're waiting for the project agreement, which, created a pretty big stir here in Washington because it basically shut down the federal aid highway program, reimbursements under the federal aid highway program. The administration since clarified to say they are targeting, quote, the Green New Deal only, but they didn't clarify what that means and what programs fall under the Green New Deal. And it's also been communicated that any projects that yet to have a project agreement are on pause. The last piece, I mean, obviously in the context of what happened last week, I think raises a lot of concerns. But I think in reality, it relatively standard operating procedure in terms of a transition from one administration to another, in terms of, executing major, grant agreements that were announced previously and not executed. I think there are no real politicals down at the department right now. The secretary is likely to be confirmed tomorrow, so hopefully that means there will be some political starting to populate, and they'll be able to take a look and potentially move some of these things forward. But as Rick said, all of this is all very vague, and we are somewhat in a little bit of uncharted territory in terms of how they're going to go after some of the infrastructure programs and how they plan to operate. It's pretty clear, not just in this area, but in a lot of things, they want to. They don't want just standard operating procedures, so we have to kind of wait and see how these things play themselves out. We've been in communication with the delegations on both sides, just kind of just being in the loop on what's happening, particularly Senator Cantwell staff, her committee staff. We've had conversations there, and we're hopeful in the sense once Duffy's confirmed and is down there, his response actually to Senator Cantwell at his confirmation hearing that he wanted to honor and try to expedite movement of project agreements that have already been announced. And hopefully Emperor will not be considered something that's part of the Green New Deal, which I don't see how it would necessarily, but so again, it's just a lot of this is vague. We're working this. We appreciate Rick, you mentioning that, happy to coordinate and have folks on that call, and just make sure everybody's talking to know what's happening as the administration starts to ramp up its activities once political appointees are down there. And happy to take whatever questions you have.
Any questions for Jim? Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Oh,
I was just gonna say, we will let the aesthetics team know not to use green as a color for the bridge.
Yeah, definitely got to change our focus a little bit in terms of how we're presenting it, but as of right now, hopefully we'll be able to start moving forward here. I think it's probably going to just take some time as we're in this transition phase.
Don't forget the natural gas pipeline we have running across the bridge.
and make sure to remind everyone we're getting rid of a green thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess with that in mind, Jim, is there any suggestions that you have for us generally when it comes to external communications? Is there any shifts that you're noticing or suggest to us to ensure we are in line with all your suggestions and comments?
No, I just think, obviously we've seen, the move away from, equity and some of the other priorities that the Biden administration had. I think, the focus on which, this project does do, on the economic development, the agricultural impacts, the resiliency between the two communities. I think some of that messaging is already there. It's just, I think this administration is going to take a different focus in terms of what they're prioritizing. So, and we could talk about exactly how we message, and Dan and I had a little exchange last week on this. So, but it also remains to be seen. We haven't fully seen where, who's down there. We obviously, they're targeting the Green New Deal. So I think going to the chairman's point, we're getting rid of something green in color, but we'll just have to see. We'll just have to stay close on kind of what they come out with in terms of guidance and instructions, and what we're hearing from the political appointees who are going down there, and what we're hearing from some of our Hill champions and the communications that they're having.
So I've been asked tons of questions from people from the general public about, gee, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And I'm not big on platitudes, so my answer has been, we simply don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. And I just want to make sure that that's correct, and if so, that all the commissioners agree that that's what we're going to be saying.
Is that a question to the commissioners, or?
Well, Jim, the question to you is you nodded, so I'm guessing that you're saying that, yeah, that's really
at this point. we could. I just think we have to wait and see. Once politicals are down at the department and how the secretary is gonna move forward on projects like ours and other projects. I think, as I said, they've clarified a lot of this is very focused from a DOT perspective on the EV charging programs in particular. So I think we just have to wait and see. I mean, a lot of those funds are formula dollars. So, how that plays out is going to be challenging. It gets into a whole other area of constitutional law related to impounding funds that Congress provided. So, I think we just have to see and be vigilant and, just continue to talk at multiple levels to folks, but we really don't know. I mean, it's all very vague.
So I've been, avoiding the doom and gloom, but also avoiding giving people any reassurances. And I hope that's really all I know how to do.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on to our partner updates. I see Monica from Federal Highways online. Do you want to say hello?
I'll say hello, but I don't have anything to add, and I know nothing about what's going to happen with infra.
How did you guess I was going to ask?
You're not the only people wondering, and I have no idea.
So we can skip right to BIP then.
Yeah, the one question I have is for Jim would be have we heard? They said they're not going to be like entering into any agreements, but we've been in the process, and so do we know if Federal Highways is just putting on a hold, saying we're not moving at all, or are they going to keep working towards it so that when we get hopefully to the end, the new administration's there and can look at it, because most of this is just reviewing documents.
I yield to Monica on that one.
I think we're not going to do anything until we get further direction. I mean, our marching orders are to do nothing, is what we've been told. And until we get new directions, which, as Jim said, I think we're expecting the hearings to end tomorrow and Sean Duffy to start on Wednesday. And then we'll start getting more directions. Okay.
I guess the important thing for us in our schedule, we had that schedule built out when we would hopefully be having the grant agreement, our best case schedule, and we just got to start building in every day that something isn't moving forward, that we've just got to extend that out. So, all right, well, that's great news. How about ODOT? I saw Rob's online. I hope you have some great news for us, Rob.
I sent an email that's kind of ODOT centric, but it is kind of ODOT has an FAQ on a website to check it out. But basically it's, we don't know everything. This is what is happening right now, and this is what isn't happening right now. And so I sent it to a bunch of you. So please forward it to everybody that wants to look at it. So,
okay.
And maybe that's the website where you can keep checking back. I don't know, but yeah, we're getting stuff every 10 minutes, left, right, whatever. So besides that, just give you a STIP update. And so that is in the process, and of course it's a process. So anyway, it's going back and forth between a version that's Salem, and then there's public comment periods and stuff like that, and it's going to be, I think, amended even again before it gets finalized. So it's just it's happening. So I'll keep you posted.
So Rob, our amendment still has to go through the public comment process?
Yeah, yes. I think it already has at one point, but then, you had the meeting with Federal Highway and you had the new financial plan, and that is going to have to get rolled into it. And then you're going to have to do another comment period. So that's what I've been told. So.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
WashDOT, I see Caroline on the.
Yes, I'm here and I really don't have much to talk about. So I'm listening, and like everyone else, we're waiting to see what happened. So no news. on my end.
Well, sometimes no news can be good news these days, it seems.
We hope so.
All right,
We
thank
all
you, ma'am.
hope so.
Okay, do we have any other stakeholders online who'd like to say hello and give us an update? Seeing anyone? All right, open action items. Nothing new there. Okay, we will move on to the consent agenda. Everyone has in their packet the list of the consent agenda items. Is there anyone who'd like to pull any items, or if not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion? The only thing I would ask that I didn't get a chance on is when you look at the items on the right-hand side on the consent agenda, it says pay as you go toll revenue. Just for clarification, that's out of our $500,000.
Yeah.
And so we're saying that none of that can be written off anymore. Or is that just at
until
this
we,
time?
not, it's just at this time until we get our overhead.
Okay. All right.
Some of that will come.
Just wanted to clarify that. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Motion carries. Next up, committee reports, engineering, construction. Mr. Fox, would you like to lead us off?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'd like to punt this over to either Catherine or Eric this time around.
Don't blame you one bit.
Wow. Catherine, do you want to dive in, or I'll give it a, oh, I just about unplugged Jake there, I think. So last week we spent a couple days talking with our contractor partner in Vancouver, as well as the ICE, to better understand where the contractor thinks costs are, where our independent cost estimator thinks costs are, and working to reconcile those. I think as Mike pointed out, all that will start to filter out as we go through the risk workshop and start to assign some of that risk and understand where it lands as versus in the estimate. We also spent some time talking about what the actual scope is, preparing for phase 1B. Those are kind of the two big things that we're kind of tracking through. So it's all part of the process. So no real answers right now, and just keep working through it. What did I miss, Mike? He's always got something I missed.
I would just say that the estimate review, the ICE team and the Keywood team, I think we're in balance now as far as quantities and typical approaches. I think we're a little bit different in a couple of key areas, and that's how we're going to deal with the North Shore access. But we've got some, I think we got some ideas that Keywood has brought up that we'll see. Some of that's going to get driven out of the risk workshop or into the future evaluations that we're going to have to do.
The only thing I'd add to that is IC is independent cost estimator. Just want to make sure we define that one. And the value engineering ideas that are coming up, I think are very helpful. And I think it's going to drive this project into a positive direction. And I think we have a really good understanding of what it costs. And we have some bookends that kind of keep us, you know, we now have a more defined scope, which will help us be able to explain it better to the public, you know, of what's actually coming. And then the other thing I think too, the huge thing is the forward progress with the various tribes too, which is really good. So there's been some forward progress there.
And the only one I would add is there's some differences between the ICE and the contractor with productivity rates. that adds up to a lot of man hours. And so that's one that we're gonna have to dial in a little bit better when we come to that firm number. Any questions for engineering and construction? Not seeing any. All right, thank you all, and thank you for all the time you spent in Vancouver and working on this. I know you guys take the brunt of the time commitment. Okay, we're going to push off on communications and government relations till Marla gets here, so we will move into our action items, which is CO02 to the PDB contract for Phase 1A budget amendment. And it's been revised in your packet that got emailed to you.
So just quick summary of this motion. This is, as you remember, we extended Kiewit's contract without a budget amendment through the end of June for Phase 1A for them to continue on to finish up 1A and get through the OPC as well as risk workshop and some opportunity engineering that we may decide to do. So we met with them, went through developing a budget that builds on the remaining budget that they had from 1A. And that's what you see in the packet. This has been communicated to the funding and finance and engineering committees with their recommendation to bring to the board to move forward with this. The one thing that would modify this is the ability for us to get our infra grant. The quicker we get the infra grant, then we will get started into full 1B design and move some of this work back into that 1B phase. If not, then this will allow us to do work under our cash flow constraint that we currently have on the project and allow us to move forward some meaningful work that will inform 1B in preparation of being able to give them notice to proceed for the 1B design work.
Would you explain a little bit? So if we would have went into 1B January 1, would it be following this in terms of spend per month, or would the spend per month been much higher?
We would have been able to expend more, probably twice as much if we'd had the infra money and move the project a little quicker. We are not able to go into any design because we don't have the funding to really advance design. So we're picking very specific parts in order to advance like opportunity discussions, getting a little more geotechnical work, some things that will drive and inform 1B and work that would have happened, but we're missing a real opportunity to be able to advance design and do more meaningful design work because of the cash flow constraints on the project.
So, but my understanding is that by picking these pieces out, when we do get into 1B, these will add more clarity to where we are in terms of cost, yes, procedure, schedule, and implementation. Correct. These are things we would have done if we'd have been able to start a full 1B, but we would have been able to also accelerate other parallel activities that we're not able to, permitting right away, other things that could have kept going as well that we've had to hit the pause button on. So.
Other questions?
I would just like to step in and say that I think we're doing the right thing about the extra work that we're awarding with this adjustment, awarding to Kiewit. It helps us protect the overall schedule. The challenge is going to be if we can't get into that infra grant for, let's say, 3 or 4 months, then our schedule's at very high risk. And I think we need to be transparent about that.
And what you're alluding to, Mike, just for clarity, is the loss of one of the in-water work windows, which is a 12-month delay.
That's right. So
he knows what we're talking about.
lost. We're going to lose the first one. We all recognize that. This adjusted plan hits the water October of 2026. But that requires most, if not all, of our design to be done. And it requires some material and so on to be mobilized before October. So I'm just concerned if the funding profile starts sliding out, by months at a time, we're gonna lose that window, which means another year. And that's just reality. I think we just gotta keep that in front of us. And if it goes out a year, the price is going up.
I have a question, I guess, for the group. It's my understanding that we do need to keep key people employed on this project full time because we also don't want to lose the key people from Kiewit that would be moved potentially to different projects. So there are things that we're trying to do, and I think our committee has seen a lot of it of the plan, and I think we have a lot of understanding. And so although I'm not a voting member, I do support trying to keep as much on the front end to keep the timeline so that we don't hit the permitting, we don't hit these issues that we have. And I didn't realize how long it takes to order materials and to kind of get that mobilization done. And so I just wanted to add that in as an idea that we do want to keep them as long as possible. My hesitation would be, if I was a voting member, because I'm not, my hesitation would be is hypothetically, if the funding doesn't come through from infra and it's redirected in whatever way, and hypothetically, if the federal funding doesn't come through, do we feel there's anything that we need to have written in to also protect the authority? And I guess that may be a legal question or something. Because if we go ahead and sign all these contracts, and I think Tahi would probably, he's in the room, we can't sign anything that we don't have money for. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is a not fixed amount amendment, so if we don't have the money, we can just stop them, and then they need to just stop and don't get paid. So we're not committed to anything as a lump sum, it's just as it goes.
Correct. And the amount that we are looking at between now and June, we've made sure stays within the available resources that the authority has without having to tap in to any loans. So we've tried to protect the authority from having to take on loans with this work that's being advanced right now. So that was one of the parameters that we kind of put around this, was to not take on debt to advance this work. So.
Arthur.
Yeah, I think you just said it, that we're not spending money that we don't have, and I think that it's important to remember that. But also, it's important to remember this is not just us. This is every infrastructure project in the entire country, and I'm worried about the dynamic that may develop where everything is on hold now and everything turns on at the same time, and all the demands for materials, all the demands for labor, et cetera, turn on at the same time. But all we can do is just be aware of it and plan for that. And we've been doing that. We're not surprised at where we are now. We've been discussing this for months, and just have to continue to do it that way.
One thing, talk about, we had the meeting with ODOT with regards to the $20 million, was that yesterday? Yesterday.
Friday.
Friday? Okay, that's why it's a little fuzzy in my mind. When we went over the schedule with when they actually sell it versus when we have access to it, did you guys build that into the timeline? And is that what we were expecting, or is it a little bit longer than what we were originally expecting?
It's about where we were expecting the money to be. We're not relying on that money to get us through June. It could be used as a next phase of funding to get us through until the next round of state money might be available, which would be July, August timeframe. But there's a lot of ifs about that. We've got to get through both state legislatures and see what's there. So right now we have not planned to use that money. but that could become available in, as we heard, May, around the May at the earliest time frame. So if we had got to the point where we need an additional month or two, we would have that, but it is not enough to get us into the full design phase. That we cannot do until we get the infrastructure.
Yeah, I know that, but at the current burn rate and what we're expecting with this change in cost, are we expected to have to use either the state loan or the county loan in order to do that?
We're not planning to use any loans right now.
Okay.
So if the authority would decide to do something, there is a little bit of additional money that they would need to consider, because it would be under the loan or using that 20 million that would be come up later. So if a property came available and you wanted to purchase it, you may be able to do that. You need to have a discussion about what that means. So there's not a lot of money, but there is a little bit if you wanted to do some small things. But again, it would just be
Okay,
need to be
so
looked at.
I reviewed the draft that you sent of the 20 million from Oregon. And do we have any grants, federal or state, that we either have or expected that will allow us to pay for interest on a loan?
I don't think so.
I don't think that that's something they would pay out of the grant.
So if we can't afford that, then other than the $500,000, we have no money that could come up to pay the interest on any of these potential loans that we spent all this time working on.
Other than, I mean, you have,
There-
Mike.
We do
dollars maybe?
have
Well,
a
no.
way of doing that. But that means that loan has to stay open until the bridge opens up and we can start paying back off of the revenue. But I think we'd want to take a real hard look at before we did that.
I think those loans would require you to pay your interest almost immediately on those. I don't think they would allow them to sit that long.
They're all short-term notes is what we negotiate.
I mean, the only other is the, and I hesitate to say this, is the revenue money that you have now that you are holding for TIFIA. It is not currently available for that use, but that is the only other money that would be available that would have that flexibility.
Okay.
Okay, just remember, we're thinking about trying to use that money for paying the invoice, submitting, and then getting the invoice back, getting the reimbursement back into that account.
Correct. You would essentially try to use that as a revolving line of credit, that you would always guarantee that that money was a reimbursable money. So
And correct me if I'm
There's no
wrong, but we've
magical
always,
answer for this non-reimbursable stuff.
correct.
we've always said when we were setting up the loans that those are for bridging some sort of cash flow problem when we know it's coming from somewhere else.
Yes, but the problem is you can bridge it, but you can't bridge the interest because we don't have somewhere to get the interest money on. And that's totally our issue. And it's not something we've ever discussed amongst the whole board. So I just wanted to bring that up, and thank goodness we don't need to use that right now to get us through this agenda item. But I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Arthur, did you have your hand up there for a second?
Yeah, just a little reminder, maybe to pose this as a question for later when we talk about state stuff. I just want to, as I understand it, there really is no state money that isn't somehow going to be linked to federal money at the point where the politics of the state money is very much what the legislature does this year, what the Oregon legislature does this year will change dramatically if the federal issues don't quiet down, calm down, whatever. And I'm pretty sure we all know that. But to talk about state money as being a solution if we don't have federal money, I'm pretty sure there is no state money if we don't have federal money.
Yeah, that's true. But the other way is not, because federal funding always requires local matching.
Yeah.
But the local match does not require federal matching.
No, I understand. I'm just saying the Oregon legislature is not likely to be launching into a highways package, a transportation package, in the same way, in the same manner, if the federal funding has dried up in the way that is being, that we might be seeing.
I think that's a fair estimate, Commissioner Babbitts, and something that we'll have to continue to watch and review. But right now, we all, as Jim said, this happens kind of on every new administration that comes in. There's always this holding period and waiting period, and that's why there's always the big rush before administration changes to get everything into agreements. We just didn't make that time frame because I think other things were a priority or other larger projects. For a second, please. We've got some great.
All right, so sorry, the one other thing I want to make sure to bring up is the project is under a cash flow constraint. If we do not get additional funding, we will have to start having conversations as soon as, I would recommend early May, about shutting things down. So just so everybody's aware, I want to make sure that is reality. Like, there is no magic. We don't have any hidden buckets. Like, if we don't see some money coming, that conversation will have to be had in May, and it won't be a matter of if we do, it'll be a matter of when we decide to do it. So
are you talking, is that just strictly on the federal dollars? But if we know that we're getting the $20 million Oregon dollars, and we know that there's going to be more Washington dollars that's budgeted, and hopefully during this legislative session we can get something more out of Oregon, we could still move on without the infra into design. We might not be able to finish design, but we could still keep moving.
that is correct. You have two paths. You've got the infra path, and then you've got the state money path, which Arthur pointed out the complexities of that. But yes, you technically have two paths that you could move through, one be the design phase with.
You certainly can't go into two without having the whole funding done.
Correct.
You may be able to get partway through 1B if you don't have all of that funding. The 75 million from infra basically protects the design schedule.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so we have an action item on the table. We've discussed it thoroughly and went down a few rabbit holes. I would entertain a motion.
Or I'll move to approve, or I'll move to amend the budget for the PDB Phase 1A contract with Hewitt Infrastructure to increase the contract budget by $1,827,650, bringing the total not to exceed amount to $8,950,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll give it to Eric. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? I didn't hear any. Okay, so we'll move on to our informational items.
So the first one we've talked a little bit about, we have a risk workshop that will be done with FHWA. We've been working through the schedule and agenda with Monica. We're scheduled right now for the week of February 24th to the 27th. It will be a 4-day workshop. The first day will be with the contractor. The second day will be with the owner only. The third day will be running the Monte Carlo scenarios. And then the fourth day is a catch-all if we go over on one of the first 2 days. Right now, based on previous discussions, it looks like we're talking about having that be a public meeting. I just want to make sure and confirm that that's what the authority would like to do. We would like to have, if the authority members are going to attend, if you can at all possible, attend all 4 days, or at least the first 2 days and the third day for the scenario. And then if we go a fourth day, just for continuity of being able to hear all the pieces and parts. And if you would choose not to do it as a public meeting, I think that would be fairly normal for risk workshops, but there is a report that will be finalized summarizing the risk workshop and what came out of it that we could spend an additional meeting after the workshop going through either at one of the board meetings or a special meeting to spend the appropriate amount of time summarizing what happened during the workshop. And that just might be a little more schedule friendly to everybody. But I wanted to just have that conversation with you about whether you would prefer to do that versus having to attend 3 days of a risk workshop. It is all day, so I know there was a request to move that to an evening time period. I'm just not sure how to make that work with it being an all day event, but as I said, we could try to plan the discussion around the report and the outcomes maybe at a later time where we could make that more open to everybody to attend. So just wanted to give you that option and open that up for your discussion.
I guess let's start with who here or online is going to be able to attend the 3 or 4 days. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Catherine, you're not going to be able to make it for 4 days? You're mute. Oh, there you are.
I am. Mike, can you repeat the dates again?
It's the 24th, the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th of February.
Yeah, so my employer is not allowing me to devote 40 hours of work to this. And I can't commit. If I can't commit to all, I can't commit, but I desperately wish I was there because this is going to be an important event. I'm not trying to keep this from the public, obviously, but it would be, has there ever been a risk workshop that's public? I guess I'm asking that question to the group because I think that if I was the contractor and I was doing this, there's a lot of, potential secrets, if you will, of my company or, how I do business. And I just would feel that more comfortable having a very open and honest conversation and having it be a public meeting. I mean, you could have a competitor come on. So I'm just wondering, is there a precedent that it is a public meeting and would FHWA approve a public meeting? And just making sure that we've discussed this through. Because it is
I've asked FHWA, and it's because it's a consultant led, it's your meeting. It's up to you all whether you make it public or not. FHWA does not have an opinion on that.
As the owner's rep, do you suggest that this be a public meeting?
No. And not because it shouldn't be. I think giving the report at the end is the proper way to do it. But I think just knowing it's just a lot of discussion and back and forth. And if you're only there for parts, it would be very hard to understand if you didn't show up for other parts. I think having a concise report after that gives you the opportunities, the threats, the baseline 70th percentile cost, as well as the probabilities and bookends of, your upper limits and lower limits. It'll be a lot more informative and time effective for folks to, spend an hour or 2 hours going through the report than it would be for folks to attend 3 days of a lot of what'll seem like circular conversation.
Commissioner Babbitts.
Could we just check with Mark, who's on, I think Mark is still around, on whether we can have a quorum of commissioners present if it's not a public meeting? Because there will be deliberation happening there.
Generally not. Generally, you're not allowed to appear as a quorum in these types of meetings unless there's an express exemption and it's treated as an executive session.
Right. And so how many of us are on this list already? We have Mike, we have Jake.
And Eric, 3 of you.
Okay.
I
suggest that we.
Yeah, I can skip it. It's fine.
I'm sorry, say again?
Oh, Grant had his hand raised, but he just said he can skip it. It's fine.
So we could, I can drop it so we're not.
I think what we'll do is we can make sure that there's only 3 available. I've never seen a risk workshop that's open to the public. I hear what Catherine is saying. If I was the contractor, I would definitely not want it to be, open or recorded or anything else. I don't think if it was a public, meeting, we wouldn't be looking at Zooming it. It would just be, you would have to be here in person. It would just be an open public meeting that way.
But the conclusory document, which is going to be shared with all of us, will be a public document that the press will get and anyone else will get, right?
Yes, and one of the thoughts I was having is, I know Marla had brought this up, like, can this be a public meeting? Can it be in the evening? One of the things is when we have the discussion amongst ourselves, because this is going to be coming out with your single number and everything, that to me is something we could do an evening meeting for, so that if the public wants to show up and have a discussion and have an informal discussion with us about how did you get here? We can't believe how amazingly cheap. How did you guys make it so cheap? That conversation.
That's how it'll go.
Yeah. Great job, you guys. That was an amazing risk workshop. Show us how you got there. I think that could be an evening meeting and see if the public does show up and make sure Noah and the Columbia Gorge News is there and everybody else. But in terms of the actual, nobody wants to sit through 4 hours.
4 days.
4 days. No one wants to sit for 4 hours, let alone 4 days.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I think Mike said this earlier, but emphasize it. Having the public invited is one thing. For them to show up for an hour here, then leave, then drop back in for an hour, then leave, and pick the next day for an hour. They could pick a portion of the discussion and think that's the way it's going all the way through. And very rarely does that happen. You're going to bounce around during those 4 days, coming to a conclusion.
Mr. Babbitt.
Yeah, no, I understand that. The question, obviously, there was never a discussion, at least. So 2 separate issues. One is, can the public observe? Another is, can the public participate? It sounds like the evening session you're talking about is actually, you're looking to allow some participation. Is that what you were just saying?
That's what I was thinking. I would, if the public, rather than just speaking to them, having the public ask questions like, here's this document you posted and you provided. Can you explain how you got here? And having the ENC group and all of us together and Mike and hopefully the ICE to walk people through it if they truly want to know, like if they're writing a newspaper article, so that they can get those answers. And to me, that's your evening meeting. These meetings are our business meeting and there's time for public comment. For me, evening meetings it's time for public discussion.
So, but there has to be a meeting at some point where this committee reports out its conclusions to the full commission.
Yep, and
that part,
and there would be separate meetings for that, Arthur, for the authority to take action or provide direction based on some of the recommendations and things that come out of the workshop. And then this would be more of an interactive meeting with the public. Specifically for them to go through the report. But yeah, there will be actions at the board meetings for the commission.
Great. No, that's I just want to be sure that we're clear on that. It's my understanding we could actually save a lot of money if we use wood chips and sawdust instead of concrete. So hopefully that'll be looked at too.
We'll take that under advisement, Arthur.
Also a ferry system. Ferry system.
We already changed the bridge to steel. Did you forget that part?
Yeah, there'll still be concrete in it, I know. Steel frame, but there's still plenty of concrete there. And yeah, Doug, I hear Doug will give us a good price.
Okay.
I need action on that. Did we ever? We did. All right. Sorry.
We took a motion.
We did. You're good. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, we're on risk updates. What are you talking about?
We talked so much, I went backwards.
OPC update.
So on the risk workshop, I just want to confirm, we are not going to have that public. We're going to do that as a separate meeting that we will schedule after the workshop. Did I hear that correctly?
So
Yes.
there will likely be
Not
an outcome that comes out of it that will come in front of the board. But we also need to get with our comms committee that we're gonna do an evening discussion about what came out of it with the public and the newspapers and all that. And so that I don't believe is part of the comms plan for their monthly plan. And it's something I'm just putting forward. It's the board's decision. If you guys think that would be valuable to have that kind of a conversation, if nobody shows up, nobody shows up. But at least it's something that we can, it'll be a big update. I mean, that's a big deal coming out of it because some of those risks that we look at that leads into potential changes probably should be vetted by the public at some point as well. Like, do you want us to spend this $50 million or do you want us to try to find a cheaper way to do it? You know, that I think is something that you have that public meeting.
It's almost a town hall.
Almost.
All right. Okay, got it. OPC updates. And again, I'll just be brief on this. We finished the second reading. It's been talked about a lot that they are in better alignment on the quantities between the independent cost estimator and the contractor. There's still a variance in price. We are going to get with HRWSBA and internally to establish a base schedule that will go into the risk workshop. And then that risk workshop will analyze all the opportunities and threats and run the scenario and come out with our 70th percentile number as well as the probabilities of it going up and down. So just wanted to update everyone where we were on that part of the process. So I think we've talked about that quite a bit in the meeting. So if there's anything else, but.
Okay.
And then the phase 1B cost negotiations, we did a scope comparison with Kiewit last week. That was one of the things that Eric mentioned. We got alignment on the scope items. We are looking at breaking this down by discipline, by deliverable for Kiewit. So we sent a template out to them and to our internal team. So they are independently developing design estimates. And then we will be coming back together with Kiewit to negotiate the fee for 1B so that when we do get infra, and I'm going to be optimistic because we haven't had a lot of that on funding this meeting. When we get the infra agreement, we will be ready to go and we can sign the agreement and move forward with designing the project. So.
I think one other thing, when we were looking at the cost this last week in person, no problem. One thing that was still put in Kiewit's was a placeholder for the cost of the 1B and the design. And so that has a change on the overall cost of the project. And so we need to get to that so that we have that better number. And so it's still just a placeholder in there at this point. Yep. Well, welcome. Thank you. Are you with the public or?
Public. I work for an engineering company in Bremen. Okay. How I want to know. I'm looking if there is something for us in the future.
Okay, well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for being there.
A public meeting, you're always welcome. Okay, do we have Marla here yet?
Yeah.
Here online. Okay, upcoming action items, do you want to hit on any of these while we?
The right of way, as soon as we're working on getting through the charter with FHWA. And as soon as we get through that charter, then we will be able to sit down and do a service agreement with ODOT. I think I got the words right this time, Rob. And when we get that service agreement, then we'll be able to sit down with ODOT and determine their level of effort for the port properties, and we'll be able to move that right of way function forward. So a couple steps there before we can get to that, but that's something we're still moving forward with and trying to get ready for when we get the funding to be able to move that forward. So.
We have a hand up from Jake. We've always been wondering which Jake it is, so please.
It's not Jake from State Farm. But I was just going to say I can certainly provide an overview of the communications work we've done if Marla is not able to make it to the meeting.
Sure. We'd love to hear it, Jake.
Okay, you want to do that? Go ahead. All right.
Yeah.
So like we've been discussing this big transition into phase 1B. So the communications team has done a full overview of basically our strategic plan for how to communicate information to dovetail with the new phase 1B. Our biggest goal is trying to remain flexible, and due to the fact that there's a lot of unknowns happening right now with various aspects of the project. So not necessarily scheduling specific communications to go out to the public, maybe holding back a little bit till more information is available. Messaging specifically for on the political end, we're going to take a lot more focus in that aspect. We're going to lean on Dan Marr and his team to sort of collectively craft communications. One of the things specifically in that realm that we're working on is putting together a clearly defined workflow. So how these messages are reviewed, how they're vetted and approved, and determining when something needs to go back to the full board for review. So we're putting together that sort of workflow for all of our communications, but specifically related to communications that go out to the Oregon and Washington, our legislatures or our federal partners. I think that overall is sort of our plan. We have a budget for our communications, and again, trying to remain flexible with that budget, knowing that this project can go a lot of different directions in the next year. So just trying to remain, you have the ability to pivot when needed. So more work to come. But if there's any questions on any of the specifics, I will try my best to answer.
Are there any questions, or Marla, do you have anything to add?
Hi, guys. I joined halfway through, so missed the beginning, but no, I think Jake, from what I heard, captured the gist of what recent conversations have been within comms.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. The goal here is we can all speak to things. So thank you for covering since I had a scheduling conflict.
Commissioner Fox.
Yeah, just some good news because it seems like we've had bad news for a while here. We received word that the Umatilla has approved our MOA with, I think it's 2 very minor word changes. So we're going to be scheduling a signature event, but within the next couple of weeks, that one's going to be behind us. That's a 4-year effort. Catherine has been involved in this thing for a couple of years. It must be her because we weren't making any progress prior to that.
So I just give one other update, Marla, you weren't on here yet, but we had the discussion about the risk workshop and whether or not to make that a public meeting. We had a pretty lengthy discussion. We decided it probably wasn't best to have that as a public meeting. But what we will do is there is going to be a report that comes out of that workshop, and we're thinking about doing an evening meeting to bring the public in for review and questions and answer on the report that comes out of the risk workshop. And so that's just something that we're going to take to the comms committee for discussion, and just something we had before you got online. So I want to make you aware if you had any questions.
I guess the one question is then, so are we affirming, was some of that driven to by confirmed commissioner interest or attendance? So we're confident we're not going to be meeting a majority of commissioners present at the risk workshop?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, we actually had to pare it down to make Mark happy.
Okay. We'll move on to government relations and Mr. Marr.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. For the record, Dan Marr here, Government Relations Strategy on the project. Thanks to Jim Kolb for running through the federal update at the beginning of the meeting here. I'm going to talk about what's happening in the two states. Few similarities, of course, both legislatures are underway. Washington has been in session for 2 weeks, Oregon for 1 week. A lot of similarities in the work we did leading up to those legislative sessions, had a number of meetings throughout the fall and into the winter with relevant transportation leadership, caucus leadership, et cetera, to keep our project top of mind as we move into legislative sessions. Now that we are there, it's really a matter of time of letting the transportation funding picture in both states start to develop while our lobbyists are in the building, kind of doing the hand-to-hand work. Again, keeping our project top of mind as those dynamics come into focus. In Oregon, in the last couple of weeks, the governor laid out her legislative agenda. Both parties did the same. No big shockers there. Priorities include housing and homelessness, as has been the case for the last few sessions, as well as transportation funding. In the last couple of weeks, Thorn Run has been meeting with a number of folks from the Joint Committee on Transportation, including Chairs McLean and Gorsuch, along with Representative Kevin Mannix. A reminder, in Oregon, our ask is $105 million in this session to round out the full commitment of 125. One piece of news, we have now a date for our Salem Lobby Day. That's going to be happening on February 13th. So we just locked that down in the last couple of days here, and we'll be working to get those meetings scheduled and figure out our roster of attendees. There was some discussion earlier of the liability bill. And so that piece of legislation has been drafted. It has not been introduced yet, but Thorn Run is working that bill in the building this week, kind of running the usual traps. So I'll pause there before diving into Washington to see if there are any questions. Okay, hearing none. On the Washington side, picture is, quite similar. Dynamics around a transportation package are still coming together slowly. At the top of the legislature's priority is passing an operating capital and transportation budget for the 25 to 27 biennium. Currently, they're looking at a pretty sizable deficit projected over the next 4 years, around $12 to $16 billion. And so, of course, states have to balance their budgets, and so finding both pay-fors and savings on the spending side are going to be top priority. As far as the transportation package coming together, there's obvious need around the state on a bunch of, a number of mega projects and not so mega projects. But given the revenue outlook and the lift of handling kind of the bigger picture budget goals, less certain that a transportation package will come through. But our lobbyist, Brad Boswell, of course, is continuing to work the relationships in the building. As a reminder, our ask on the Washington side is $50 million, which would be in addition to the $75 million we've already had committed, rounding out the full 125. Similarly, in Washington, we've got a lobby day coming up that's scheduled for February 20th. I see about 7 or 8 meetings already on the calendar. So we are working on some final logistics for that. And thanks to Brad and his team for getting us lined up there. And that's the story in Washington. I'll pause here for any questions.
Mr. Babbitt.
Dan, you're good with words. Public comes and asks you, hey, what's going to happen? We're going to get a bridge. We're going to get money. What magic words, what careful wording do you use?
I say, I hope so. I guess so. What you're asking here, Arthur, is like, how would I characterize like our chances of getting funding? Is that?
Well, how would you? What's an appropriate wording to say? We simply don't know. We have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think at all levels. I mean, I think the point remains is that we know what our goal is, right, of rounding out this funding package, and we have a path to do so. Right, we have our committed our funding targets at each state, $125 million apiece. We have 20 million in Oregon. We have $105 million ask out, Washington, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a path to rounding that out in this state legislative session. I think the final results are going to be are going to come after we see how the package dynamics come together, how much funding is available. We're doing everything in our, in the project's power to set ourselves up and be ready to, to make those asks and to deliver. If pressed, I mean, of course, at the end of the day, we're at the mercy of tax funding and finding the money to pay for these projects. And we're not the only project out there with need. But rest assured, we're doing everything we can to remain a top priority and give ourselves the best odds we can.
Thank you.
How was that?
It's yeah, I mean, it's hard. I'm repeatedly placed in a situation where people keep asking the same question again and again, hoping they get a better answer. And so I find I need to, in a slightly more more confident, not confident, but a slightly more clear way, state that it is not knowable what the conclusion of this is going to be. So you're going to have to wait.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard thing characterizing in a way that's, that's accurate and that, honors the system and the process, right? Because there's a lot going on that's way beyond the scope of our control. And then the piece of it that is within our control. And so, how to kind of bridge that gap. I mean, I think this is really the goal of the greater communications work on the project, is to kind of stay up on how these processes are moving, both in the states and at the federal level, and keep that message nice and clear and truthful. An ongoing effort.
Yeah, Arthur, I can just speak a little bit, I think, in the same place as you and for all of us as commissioners, because we do get asked that question. And I flagged it to Dan, but I was on Bicoastal Media with the Columbia Gorge show last week with Mark. And of course, conversation transitioned over to the bridge. And I think the thing that I try to make very clear to people, and I think it is it's a double-edged sword, but this project is dynamic and people are, including us, are watching it unfold in real time as more information is known. And I think as much as we can be genuine to that, the acknowledgement of, we don't know, there is a harder road ahead. The additional costs that we expect to need means we have to be securing additional funds, especially from the federal government, that to me very much are going to set the course of the future. And we don't have a clear answer. And I think what I try to make sure the public hears is that we need them now more than ever. The advocacy is not done. There are going to be certain points, especially very near on the horizon, where that public outreach and reinforcement of what we're saying is even more critical. And so I think it's trying to make sure when people do hear us that they don't think it's smooth sailing, because I think that was a little bit of how we thought we were entering into the project at the start of 24 when we got the infra. So yeah, I kind of had mentioned it to Dan of, hey, listen to what I said, because I think for all of us as commissioners, as much as we can also not try to think that our job is to make everything look like sunshine, it's not. I think we've got to be continuing to build relationship and trust and acknowledge there's some things we don't know. And there are scenarios on the horizon where if we don't see certain funding, it's our responsibility to shift in the most responsible way and get as far as we can. And how do we keep it moving? So Yeah, it was like more drawn out, but I feel you. I think a lot of us are wrapping our heads around, the right way to answer some questions right now that people understandably have.
That's really helpful, Marla. Thank you. And I'm asked it 4 or 5 times a day now. I suspect you are also. And just for the record, can I explain? AOC is Association of Oregon Counties. Just so this is on the record here and no one gets confused.
That. Any further questions for Mr. Marr or for Mr. Babbitts? Not seeing any. Thank you, Dan. Okay, do we have anything else on our upcoming action items that we'd like to discuss? Doesn't look like Doug went back offline. We will be having a governance committee meeting later this week, and we will be having the conversation at the governance committee on the dates, conflicting dates for this year, and we'll get back with when we should have those meetings. Okay.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? That was for the governance meeting?
Yep.
And what?
So we have a couple dates that conflict with holidays later in the year, and it got pushed to our committee. So I was just letting you know that we're going to have that discussion on Wednesday.
I thought Mike Shannon made a proposal on all of those.
That was for the governance committee to look at.
Oh, okay. I liked it. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else on upcoming action items? All right. Confirmation of directives. You take a lot of notes.
I have some questions. I didn't realize I was joining the meeting, but if I see now we don't have just general discussion in our agenda, so maybe if this is an appropriate point, I had some questions reading the Mike Shannon, I believe your report, and then maybe just things that might have already been raised by my seatmates. But the first one, do we have any indication with the BIP application and knowing some of the initial executive orders around equity and that our previous high score was about also scoring high on former criteria that was around equity and quality of life, how the scoring on these infrastructure projects may be changing, and is it going to impact active applications like the BIP window we're in, or is it something we need to be thinking about how we frame our project, and when can we expect that new scoring matrix?
I would say right now it probably will not impact the original BIPs that are out. Although we don't know what they're going to do with the original BIPs, and we have not gotten or heard any rumors or information related to what they're doing with those BIP applications. I would say going forward with future BIP applications, if that program continues, if not, I'm sure they'll put out new NOFOs or notice of funding opportunities, which typically lays out the goals of the program that we would probably need to look at and adjust maybe some of what we're presenting in those. But right now there's nothing that I've heard from anyone on our current BIP application.
Yeah, because the current merit criteria, which was where we ranked highest across those 3 key criteria areas, almost a majority of those subsets. Now, I don't believe it's clear that they would be the similar criteria going forward, and it was the strength of our project for a lot of the case we've been making.
Yep.
Mr. Babbitts?
Yeah, this is a perfect example of an area where I would use the "we simply don't know" answer.
Yeah.
Because I have no reason to believe that there will or won't be a political mandate that inserts itself into the BIP process. And we just have to wait and see what they do.
Great question, though, Marla.
Kind of similar, seeing the update, especially on the projected timing, which was very helpful for where we are in the EIS process, but also concerned seeing that we're currently at DOJ. And my understanding is a lot of Senior staff, especially in the environmental department, have been reassigned. Who is our contact within DOJ? When would we know if the current window for right now actively we're at DOJ, if that's going to push outward? Just thinking how that's going to continue to affect those future projections on timing when we get to the final 30-day window.
So the DOJ on that is the state DOJ, so I don't think they've been affected in the same way. So I think we're good there.
And then I was just curious, and I imagine maybe this is something Arthur can talk to me about offline, but I keep seeing in these reports the ongoing research and look into the Port of Hood River bridge deed from the 1950s. And I was just curious about some additional insight or context for what is it that's continuing to be so thoroughly reviewed, or what is it we think is in there that's maybe not clear?
I certainly haven't heard of any lack of clarity. I know that that's 1949 is when the purchase happened, and I've seen the documents. I didn't. Mike, do you know anything about this?
The only thing I would say on that was just there was a lot of research into confirming the ownership of the port and where all their property lines and things were, but I believe all of those have been identified and ownership now of where they are. There was also some questions around future or previous use of some of the property and how it affected the 106. So there was some clarity that we had to get out of that as far as things that were always used for a transportation purpose so that we didn't have to mitigate 106 for that. So the ownership of the port property was a challenge for our surveyors to get their hands around the history of that.
Yeah, I certainly know. I see Kevin's popped up, and I'm sure he'll amplify this. But I certainly know that it's inundated lands. So the title and the intersection of things, and then the flowage easements, Army Corps of Engineers flowage easements, et cetera, on top of all that. Then ODOT coming in, building an interstate highway on top of it. All of this intersects to make it just a very, very messy area. Fortunately, it's a bunch of public ownership, not a bunch of private ownerships that are intersecting.
Thank you.
Mr. Greenwood, did you have anything to add? Okay. Carla, do you have any other questions?
Nope.
All right. And I think those surveys, I've noticed that that's been on the update, kind of in the same language for the last few months. And so thank you for bringing that up. I keep catching it and forgetting to talk about it. One of the other things that came up was, I know, Marla, you have a conflict for these meetings for the first hour for the foreseeable future. Would you like to move the comms update to the first meeting of the month, or would you rather us push the meeting time back from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock?
I'm fine with moving to the first meeting of the month. That works.
Okay. Make that change on the agenda.
Can I ask a question of the board? So I do have a question, and Marla's question brought it up and what Jake just said as well. So on the bridge update report, if there is no change from the previous report, would you all rather nothing be on there and just say no update? Or would you rather the last information remain until there's new information?
Last information remain till there's new.
Maybe that's okay.
Everybody's asking me.
Is everybody on board with Eric's response?
Yeah, that's the latest information that would be available.
Right away has been stagnant for quite a while, so I just wanted to make sure that, or we can put, we do it on our version and say no updates, but do you want us to put on there no updates so you don't spend time trying to find out if there was an update?
I like the way that attorneys do it, so I don't have to read all that every single time. It just says no updates, so I skip through it.
All right, and we have that on ours. We just take it off for yours, so we'll leave that on. And that way you know if something's been updated or not.
Your copy. Okay. Any other general discussion from members of the board or questions?
be in Salem all day tomorrow. Going around seeing the same people that we need to see.
But on something different.
Related.
Are you taking our mascot?
I can. No, I'm not taking her.
Okay, just making sure she's our mascot, not the city's mascot.
Thanks.
But if you did, they would remember you.
She's a little bit too mobile to do that now.
Do you have any spare time while you're down there that you would like for us to talk to going around about any meetings?
I'm going to be there all day.
Okay.
I'm sure.
Does that mean you do have some free time?
Yeah, we can talk the schedule.
Okay, well, let's talk about that while you're down there as well.
Okay, other updates? Bridge members? Catherine, how's the weather in New York?
The weather is fine, but the mood is low because the Buffalo Bills lost to Kansas City yesterday, and we are all devastated. And so that is my update.
I had to give you the platform for you.
I figured you were like passing me the baton just to somehow plug the Bills, but you know, everybody should be sad for the Buffalo Bills, unless you're not. And then I guess good luck to your team.
Okay, we don't have anything else for the confirmation of directives. You've got all that written down. We don't have any community events currently scheduled. Our next meeting will be Monday, February 10th, 2025, 2 to 4. And with that, we have no executive session and we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you all. Have a great day and